Now let's continue with a journey to the west. Today we've reached the third stop. The third stop is Rocky Mountain. Rocky Mountain is very, very beautiful. If you go there in the future, following His Holiness's footsteps, you can visit each city along the way. It's quite interesting. Now, when I think about it, I really wish I could retrace that journey in a relaxed way. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance. It would feel very meaningful. The next section is at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. On June 30th, we left beautiful Boulder and drove to the north, traveling over mountain after mountain, like riding on a roller coaster. After a drive of 2 or 3 hours, we arrived at Rocky Mountain Dharma Center. Let me introduce it a bit. As vast as the Himalayas in Tibet, the Rocky Mountains are the largest mountain system in North America. They stretch thousands of kilometers. Drainage of the Rockies runs westward to the Pacific Ocean and eastward to the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. This mountain range is comparable to the Himalayas or Mount Kailash. Its different rivers flow into different oceans, quite remarkable. Actually, I didn't want to include too much other unrelated information. Otherwise, sometimes I wanted to simply record some of the things I knew at the time, but later I worried the text would be too long. Otherwise, I did have some notes back then. Nowadays, it's easier to look things up anyway. In July, the Rocky Mountains have a very moderate and pleasant climate, neither too hot nor too cold. The forests, lakes, grasslands and glaciers there are wonderful. All of these can be seen there. The sky is bright, the wind is clean, and the water is crystal clear and glistening. At our Larung Academy, the wind is bone-chilling, with snow swirling everywhere. The ice on the roads can be quite dangerous. Anyway, this place is really wonderful. Being surrounded by such a beautiful environment, the mind naturally becomes calm, as if being exposed to a solitary place in Tibet, where the great masters of the past lived in retreat. Here is His Holiness's cabin. He stayed here at that time. He stayed here throughout all 7 days. It's a wooden cabin. A few years ago, I asked someone to check. It's still there. This photo was taken recently. Someone is still living there. Actually, there aren't many photos here. Most of them are down in the forest. Originally, there were several nice photos, but they weren't included later. They are still quite interesting. This Dharma Center preserved the Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Most of the practitioners were Americans. On the mountain, some had built small wooden huts. Here you can only see 2, but there were actually many more in that forest. Some pitched tents. They stayed away from the noise of the secular world, practicing shamatha all year round. Many of them had been in retreat for more than 6 years. All of them were thrilled by His Holiness's arrival. They were eager to receive profound empowerments and pith instructions of secret mantra from him. Because this place was entirely a retreat center, unlike the previous cities we visited, everyone here was a practitioner, so His Holiness gave them empowerments and taught secret mantra. These were quite profound teachings. Before, there would sometimes be people from other religions or non-Buddhists, so the audience wasn't always certain. Then there's a section called A Relaxed Chat. On the afternoon His Holiness arrived at Rocky Mountain. He gave a short talk to the people there and then blessed everyone by touching their heads. They all lined up. Here they actually conducted formal Dharma ceremonies, including empowerments. At the previous stop, Nechung Monastery was okay, but in Boulder they didn't really do head blessings or anything like that. They have a big tent there. The main hall at that center is a big tent. Actually, I heard that now that Dharma Center doesn't have that many people anymore. It's quite a pity. That place, if in the future, originally there was a big stupa next to it. We'll talk about that later. This place is really quite interesting. After a short break, His Holiness sat under the eaves outside the wooden cabin, looking out into the forests and mountains far away, enjoying the beautiful landscape all around, and had a relaxed chat with Gyatrul Rinpoche and others. At that time, Gyatrul Rinpoche and several other Tibetan Buddhist masters were there. His Holiness was at that cabin you just saw by the window at the back. But looking at this photo, His Holiness was sitting there. But now the eaves seem to extend further out. Maybe they renovated it a bit later, I'm not sure. Anyway, at that time His Holiness was there with Gyatrul Rinpoche. Gyatrul Rinpoche was recognized at a young age as a reincarnated Tulku by Domang Monastery. Actually, Tulku Yeshe Dorje of Domang Monastery and others went to Jinchuan and Damba area. When they returned, they brought him back with them. They considered Jinchuan to be a Chinese area, so Gyatrul means Chinese Tulku. A Chinese reincarnation, that's why he was called Gyatrul. Later, it seems he didn't stay there for very long. Then the 10-year turmoil began and he went to India. After arriving in India, some great masters there requested a group of teachers to propagate the Dharma in the West. So he went to the United States. Originally, at the beginning, he was recognized as a Tulku by Domang Monastery. He always considered it to be his monastery. He would say to me, "The young Khenpo from my monastery, our young Khenpo." He was quite attached to the idea of me being from his monastery. Later, he went to America to propagate the Dharma. So during their conversation, Gyatrul Rinpoche talked about Domang Monastery. He said he'd like to revisit Sertar and Domang Monastery. Before, at the request of Yangthang Rinpoche, he had been asked to visit Domang Monastery. When he arrived at Drango, he hired a car and went directly to the monastery. When he arrived, Tulku Tishta saw him and asked, "How come you are here? I didn't expect you to come. Why didn't you let us know in advance?" Gyatrul Rinpoche said, "I don't like to inform everyone beforehand, since there would be all kinds of welcome reception. I am the same old me, even worse than before, so there's no need to tell you in advance." That's what he told Tulku Tishta. I heard it was around 1987 when His Holiness was at Wutai Mountain, but I'm not certain about this date. Some monks still remember. When he came, the monastery's conditions were very poor. They wanted to receive him properly, but they didn't even have tsampa, let alone anything else. They had a room they quickly cleaned up and received him there. He felt the monastery's conditions were especially poor. He gave each monk 5 yuan and a vajra cord. 5 yuan was quite significant back then. He gave the monastery 2,000 yuan. Then they went back. They left in a hurry without even staying overnight. This was his impression of Domang Monastery at that time. He said at that time Domang Monastery was just beginning to be rebuilt. It was rebuilt in 1985, so he probably visited in 1986. He said there were about 20 or 30 dormitories for monks. Now it's doing better. At that time there were about 50 or 60 monks. He wanted to help build a Buddhist academy, but for various reasons he wasn't able to do so. He prayed to the Guru and the 3 jewels that everything would become better in the future. Later he told Yangthang Rinpoche, "I've been to your monastery. The conditions there are really poor. As a Tulku, you should think of something. If you come to America, I'll help you raise some funds. Otherwise, they're just too poor." Later, Yangthang Rinpoche did go to Taiwan and America to raise some funds. And then where our Buddhist academy is now, a Buddhist academy was built. Yangthang Rinpoche built it. It cost several 100,000 yuan at that time. Later, since the building had been there for quite some time, it was rebuilt again. So at that time, Gyatrul Rinpoche was quite surprised and said, "Wow, the conditions here are so poor." He was really surprised. Then he said a lot to Yangthang Rinpoche, encouraging him to raise funds and find a way. Actually, the masters of past generations always had it in their hearts, building monasteries, establishing Buddhist academies, helping the Sangha. No matter what, regardless of their abilities or the circumstances of the time, the monasteries in Tibet nowadays were all built by great masters who accomplished great things during their time. As for our Domang Monastery, it was built several times by different masters. Every time I tell these stories, they're quite moving. At the very beginning, Tulku Tishta went to the Hongyuan area to raise funds. He was quite heavy. He went around asking for donations and nobody knew him because at that time he hadn't yet gone to the Buddhist academy to receive the transmission of the Kangyur. Later, someone named Aku Gendun Norbu recognized him. After that, he helped him hire a hand tractor and helped raise some funds. I think they raised about 60,000 yuan or so. Then the monastery's first simple assembly hall was built. Actually, conditions everywhere were poor at that time, so building a monastery was really not easy. But in those masters' hearts, perhaps their only thought was to nurture talent, to train these monks, including our academy. Sometimes when I think about it, I think to myself, if I told you about the conditions at our Buddhist academy back then, you probably wouldn't believe it. It was like living in primitive times. The carpets you sit on now, the tutoring rooms, the teaching halls, none of these were even imaginable back then. Sometimes, just to buy a bottle of kerosene or 2 or 3 gin of dried noodles, we'd walk all the way from the Mandala area to town. I did it myself. It took just over 4 hours on foot. Then after buying what we needed, we still had to come back that night. The next day's journey would also take over 4 hours. At night it was slower, about 5 hours. Sometimes we'd get back at 6 in the morning, or even 3 in the morning, probably now. Back then there was no electricity, and the food was poor. Even His Holiness's room was very simple. So when we talk about our pursuit of learning back then, if someone told you about it now, you'd think it must have been from primitive times, not from our modern era. So sometimes when I think back on their pursuit of learning, it's quite touching in many ways. At that time, they talked about the conditions and situation of our monastery. Then His Holiness said, if the authorities give the permission, the construction of Domang Monastery wouldn't be a problem. The Likokma clan is a large clan, relatively speaking, considering the clan's total population compared to the monasteries. The monastery is not a big one since the clan is quite large. Both the upper and lower Likokma clans are quite large. But generally speaking, the Dharma there is still considered to be flourishing. Religious practice had just been allowed again at that time, so conditions everywhere were quite poor. At that time I felt Khenpo Depa and Tulku Tishta had such a hard time building the monastery. Sometimes I think, now that things are a bit better, if only they could see it, how wonderful that would be. But they have all passed away one after another. So sometimes when we finally achieve something, the people who cared for us and nurtured us may already be gone. The same goes for all of you here. In the future, when you propagate the Dharma, benefit beings, establish centers, and achieve great success in various areas, the teachers who trained you may have already merged into the Dharma Dhatu. Perhaps from a pure realm they'll be watching over you with their divine eye. The upper and lower Likokma clans together have over 1,000 households. They are very united. No matter what their gurus say, they will follow the instructions faithfully. Actually, this is part of what I recorded at the time, but later there was also video footage. Later I wondered whether to leave out the parts related to me, but then I thought it's all true, and now there's video, so these things are quite clear, so I recorded what happened that afternoon. Gyatrul Rinpoche was truly remarkable. When A Journey to the West was almost finished, I've written up to the point when we had just returned to the academy. On that very day, Gyatrul Rinpoche passed into parinirvana. Just as I was writing The Journey to the West, it should have been around April 13th, I heard that he had passed away over there. He was in his 90s. So all these masters, one after another, are like this. At that time, His Holiness also said that indeed our masters, Tulku Tishta, Khenpo Depa, Khenpo Lashe, whatever they said, the local people would truly listen. It's still the same now. They still listen faithfully. It's not just us. Actually, in many Tibetan monasteries, when the great masters speak, the people below will basically all follow their instructions. His Holiness also asked Gyatrul Rinpoche about the overall situation of Buddhism in the US. At that time, how many Dharma centers were there roughly? How many in New York? About how many in Washington? How many in Colorado? His Holiness asked all these questions. Also, how many people here could give empowerments? How many people here were truly practicing? His Holiness loved to ask about their situations in detail. Since we had just arrived on the American mainland, there were things we didn't know, so he asked. Gyatrul Rinpoche answered each question one by one. They also chatted about some other topics. All right, let's stop here for today.
Larung Gar Badna Sodargye Larung Gar Badna Sodargye Larung Gar Badna Sodargye